Welcome to another week, Drugs, Brain, and Behavior. I hope things are progressing well with your outlines. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns. Again, I understand that Media Club in general is generally a polarizing assignment. There tend to be a lot of students who love it, and then some students who don't love it so much. I would like to try to convince you again that this is a great assignment that really helps you think deeply and critically about drugs and their impacts outside of the box, outside of my lecture. And it is a really a blank slate type of assignment rather than one that I restrict too much with a rubric intentionally. I don't want you to give me, well, you can if that's really what you want to do, but I'm not expecting a traditional scientific research paper here. Rather, I would like you to have, broad opportunity here to explore drugs way outside of the bounds of dopamine. I want you to be able to consider how, maybe changes in AA or like what is AA? That's a common one that I get a lot. Sort of a deep dive exploring that program. A lot of students cover the intersection of addiction and race or socioeconomic status. How does enrichment or coming up in an impoverished area impact the addiction process? What about the interaction between drugs and the growing them and indigenous communities, particularly down in South America? What about the effects of the family unit? What about peer pressure? What about glorification of drugs through media? What about advertisements, the effects of ads on addiction? Um, what about just characterizing the addiction process itself? Really doing a deep dive or reflecting on how different people that have gone through the addiction process express their experiences and stories through these movies or through the music. And then, of course, the book. I mean, Bill Poland's book. I mean, there are so many different angles that you can approach that. First, if you wanted to, you could just do a review of the book itself. The book club itself, it has the shortest paper because I expected to take a little bit longer to prepare by reading an entire book versus listening to several mixtapes or watching a few movies. None of this is trivial. I understand that all of it's going to take some time and then a lot of deep thinking associated with it. I mean, it's also about a third of your grade. I mean, this isn't meant to be something that you do in a day. But with the book, in addition to doing a review of the book itself, you could also consider uh, you know, how psychedelics might actually be functioning, the mechanisms involved. You can think about this at a psychological level, like the Jungian, the spiritual side of it. You can think about it from a more Freudian perspective, dissolving the ego, these sorts of ideas. I know one student's exploring, the church aspect. I mean, that's a fascinating one. True story. There's one of these churches about 30 minutes from my house. One of my baristas goes about every other month and tells me all about it. I think it's called a Pantamama or something like this. They have people that come up from Colombia with the ayahuasca and basically go you go and you stay with them for a weekend and they bring you on a spiritual journey and some involve music, some involve more sort of ritual, but it involves sort of a deep reflection and sort of going on a introspective journey enhanced by the drug. So anyway, you could explore that. You could explore these churches, the legal regulations associated with it. On that note, I do think that it's interesting that that we think of the First Amendment as sort of a free speech amendment. But I mean, if you really look at the first line of the First Amendment, the very first thing that is in the Constitution, in these amendments, is the right to practice religion according to your own beliefs and approaches. So, I mean, if this is how you achieve spiritual growth, I think you should argue or could argue very strongly that that would be constitutionally protected as your right to do so. So yeah, that's just another angle. I think another one there could be reform. What are the potentials of the psychedelics to help reform a prison population? How about accepting death? What might their utilization be in hospice? That could be a very interesting paper as well. So anyway, there are really countless avenues that you can explore with this blank slate assignment. And I understand that that can be frustrating, but at the same time, I unapologetically think it is a very good thing to help you think deeply and critically about drugs in some context that you are most passionate about that gets out of the lectures. I mean, like, there's more to drugs than dopamine. As I've alluded to before, really, as a dopamine researcher, I actually see the role of dopamine in addiction to be a little boring at this point, having published, 40 some papers on dopamine. Dopamine might be involved in the initial positive experience of taking a drug. Uh, I mean, this is the dogma, hijacks the dopamine system, which is evolved to help us naturally seek positive stimuli. And I've also argued avoid negative ones in our environment. However, if you talk to anybody who's used drugs for an extended period of time, I challenge you to find me one that will tell you that they are using drugs because drugs feel great. Usually, they don't feel much pleasure from the drug itself anymore at all. The addiction process, and I do think of it very much as a process that can be fast forwarded or slowed down depending on a variety of factors like the environment that you're in. This can be, greatly impacted by many variables, and the actual process, I think, only partially involves dopamine. And if it does involve dopamine, in most cases, I think it involves a general loss of dopaminergic function. Natural rewards like food, sugar, sex, music, these become less pronounced. The ability of drugs themselves to evoke dopamine release is also going to lose its impact. Rather, I think you might see more of an emergence of the dark side of addiction, where you might have more activation of the HPA axis. Your amygdala might be screaming at you to go chase more drug, and then you make yourself right again, to make your head straight. These are sort of the expressions that you hear when you ask severely drug dependent people, why are you taking drugs? It's more to make my head straight, more to escape the hell that I'm in, more to make the pain go away. It is rarely because they're chasing a dopamine high or a rush. That's really only in the initial phases. Uh, so yeah, I do think that there could be some benefit in extended release amphetamines and these sorts of things that could help right the ship. But even there, you are playing with fire a little bit by because any long-term drug abuser knows much more about pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics than most PhDs in the subject. They certainly know how to alter the route of administration from a time release form to one that is not a time release form, and can then get back on drugs through drug-induced relapse very quickly. So it's even that I think is something that gives me pause. But that is, anyway. So yeah, just studying how dopamine goes up when you take drugs. If that's all we learn in this class, I don't think that you're really getting a good grasp of drugs and addiction. I think exploring it really from outside of the box ways is a great way to do it. And in this media club, through various artists' contributions to music and movies and books, I think you can explore drugs in a very unique way and then expand on it in ways, and you can bring in stuff from other classes. Maybe you don't think addiction has anything to do with the brain at all. Uh, Perfectly fine take. Explore it. Give me an essay about it. Yeah, push back against my dopamine dogma. Please, I'm begging you. I think you will be better off for it. Think critically, think deeply about drugs. That's the purpose of this assignment. I really hope that you get something out of it and you don't just think of it as busy work. It most certainly is not designed to be busy work. I think it's, a great learning tool. And please let me know if you have any questions or concerns about it as you're coming up with your final outlines here. Thank you for your attention and your great participation so far in this class. I'm very impressed and pleased with the amount of critical thinking that we've had so far in our various discussions on highly controversial topics related to pharmacological research, uh, rational drug design. I think it's important to be self-critical of myself and my own techniques and my own knowledge. I mean, that's something I'm trying to convey here as well. We haven't designed the perfect psychiatric drugs yet. So how do we move the ball forward rather than just spinning our wheels like we've been doing over the last few decades? I think we're starting to move the ball forward a little bit more. And, but it's also not all negative either. We've made so much progress over the last 100 years, going back to the ideas of us, dunking patients in cold baths in psychiatric hospitals and chaining people to walls. I think outpatient psychiatry is, a huge advance. We have great tool drugs comparatively to where we've been. However, I don't think we should be satisfied with where we are either. So, how do we move the ball forward? Let's also be critical of where we are and, think deeply and critically of how not only drugs impact us in many ways at the social level, at the environmental level, how we're impacting different populations with these drugs. Also, let's consider how we can advance the research process to develop more personalized medicine and really make drugs better made for all people, irrespective of, sex, gender, race. How do we really tailor these drugs to the individual moving forward? I think it's a little insane that we still to this day have very sort of general standard guidelines. I mean, my wife and I would be taking the same dose of acetaminophen, but our body types are very, very different. Just as one example. You can see this clearly with alcohol intake or cannabis intake. Lipophilicity, as plays a big role in, pharmacokinetics. Lipophilicity can change a lot depending on hormones, depending on really even the stress that you're under, where you are in life, the environment around you. So yeah, how do we factor in some of these variables in determining an ideal drug, but not only the ideal drug, but the ideal dose for the individual? All just things I want you to think about in addition to the role of dopamine in addiction, which is, oh, so boring. Anyway, thank you again for the great semester so far. I hope you're learning a lot.